scamming could be hiding other activities where the real murders are. So we have to be careful about how we label as well. Among partners and parents of persons involved in gangs and scamming, we often ignore the role of women in violence, in promoting violence, in instigating violence. We have not done sufficient research on that at all. But young women and girls are attracted to their money-colored men, and that's what they call bleach men with tattoos, who are able to spend lavishly on them. And women and girls have their own roles. Some collect funds, some carry weapons, some are migrating to dialing. Right. So those, I think, would give you some idea of the emerging challenges. I'm still cognizant of the time, and so I'm just going to say just two things in terms of recommendations. We should have, and there are so many reports that it's painful, addressed a long time ago the inequalities that underpin crime and violence in this country. In any society, the insecurity that is characterized by crime and violence can be the outcome of wider and pervasive insecurities, such as of income, employment, education, and health. We have a responsibility for transformative education. And by this I mean reaching people where they are and bringing them to a vision that is well beyond their social box. It is not enough to have a program that relegates people to subsist in the same conditions generation upon generation. They actually have the same vision as every other social class in this country. And then addressing the spiritual roots to crime and violence is something that we do not consider. While the government does not dictate religious choice, state authorities should be cognizant of the potential cost of particular decisions. And here it is worthwhile for me to highlight the perception that Obia is legitimized by the state. People tell me, Mama P legalized it, this person do it, that person is in it. And as a consequence, they believe there are no boundaries on how it is utilized. So although people were careful to distinguish between good self-protecting Obia and bad avenging Obia, there was an agreement that everybody's stepping out into the world of the spirits. There are some places where I've been told that this is the age of enlightenment. And so spirituality appears to provide a legitimizing force. Particular spiritual alliances, loyalties, and practices may have direct and indirect influence on certain forms of crime and violence, and unraveling these requires specific spiritual guidance. The government has to prioritize the partnerships that are necessary for ensuring that this essential component is comprehensively addressed. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Moncrieffe. Now, I'm sure if I had asked her to talk for another half hour, you'd all still be sitting glued. Now, I think she has raised a lot of issues that I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of questions about in the other forum. Yes, definitely another round of applause. That's a very good piece of research. And for both community members and partners alike, it raises a lot of issues that we need to consider, because as a country, we keep talking about the impact of our projects, and I've been hearing a lot of talk about that. What are the indicators? How do we know we have achieved? But at the same time, how do we know we're targeting what really needs to be targeted? If we're doing the same thing and getting the same results, maybe we're not doing things right. So at forums like this, we get a chance to have this type of discussion, and we also get a chance to use evidence-based research to guide the decision-making process. Now, we will go ahead, but I am going to crave the indulgence of my other two panelists who are sitting here to allow us to take SSP McGregor before, just because we don't want to lose the Skype connection again while we have him. So we'll now cue in SSP McGregor.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. SSP, it's your time.
Well, I am happy to engage with you and to share with the topic that you are discussing, even though you are intruding on my little time that I've gotten away from my hectic work schedule, but nonetheless, I am happy to be here with you. As it relates to the relationship between the police and the citizen, those citizens that we seek to serve and to serve with the consent of the citizen, we must drum up a proper relationship with them. I can remember when I was tasked by the commissioner, then Commissioner Ellington, to take command of the West Kingston division. I was interviewed, and the question was asked, what is the strategy that you'll be using to police the West Kingston division? I remember clearly telling the interviewer at the time that I'm going there to make a connect with the citizens of West Kingston. And that is generally what we did in West Kingston. And the results that we got then was solely because of the relationship that we ironed out with the citizens and the police. At the outset, we would have community meetings, and I would ensure that I would be a part of that community meeting. As a commander, you want to go there and to give them your thoughts, your vision. And it was consistent right around the different communities that we would have gone to. Our research at first showed that the West Kingston area community is one that believes in representation, leadership, and it would come from either politics, area leaders, and of course, guns that ruled then. So you would have to find a suitable replacement for those kind of leadership for you to get a hedge into what is happening in communities like those. So I was transferred to the West Kingston division at the end of 2012. And we went about doing that. I think it was somewhere about September. And we went about drumming up that relationship. It was like 3 meetings per week, and we did it right through to the end of the year, where the message would be brought as to what we want of the community, and the community themselves would engage us as to how we can impact what they were doing there. There was a lot of apprehension at first, but as we got to know each other and they got to know the leader that was me and what we were bringing to them, the guards were dropped and people were more receptive. I can remember in Labor Day project that we had in 2013, we had people from Tivoli Gardens in the Denham Town division fixing up the station, climbing on top of the station, painting, and there was that sort of camaraderie that started to build then. We find that these citizens from the inner city communities, they would use dancing as their, way of letting off steam. They would call it round robin, night out, fry. There are various names that they would use to give these functions, boat rides, and we would tap in on it. And we drummed up a relationship with them where we would give dances to the communities that would have low level of crime and violence. We would say if there's no shots fired in your community, you would get permission to have dancing. But if you have shots fired and high level of violence, those communities would not get any dance. So they had a vested interest in making their communities safe. What I'll do to sweep the pot as the commander, during the week, you would have dancing would be permitted from up to 12, that is the Noise Abatement Act, and during the weekend it would go up to 1. What we'll do with the community is violence free, no shots fired. We'll give them up to 1 during the week, and during the weekend it will go up to 3 p.m. We would also give them a added sweetener where if they were good enough to get the commanding officer to attend these dances, well, the dance could go longer depending on how long the commanding officer stays there. And that is me that I'm speaking of. Now, this worked like a charm. And what we also did is that whilst I'm at these functions, you would not get people like these in a setting. No meetings would get the kind of turnout that you get at a dance, a varied participants there. So I would take the mic somewhere about 12 midnight and to speak to them about 5 minutes to give them punchline as to what I would want of them, to laud them if the community is safe, as also to speak on some other things. And this grew, and we had a relationship where they would have the commander it as a household name. And my office staff would tell you that on a daily basis, I would see up to 30, 40 people coming to me at Denham Town for advice or just to talk or just to come and see the boss. Because this is how they would have been um, cultured into living in the community. So I was like a replacement of what was there before. We went on and things got on really well where we said we want to give back to the citizen for what they were doing. So we thought having a function that we could generate some funds and they would use those funds to give back in different ways to the community. And the first thing that came to mind was, of course, a dance. And we had a social event in that Denham Town space at the station where we cleared out the entire station compound and we crammed in there close to 6,000 people. People from all around West Kingston were represented. And I can speak and testify to this that this happened because I was at the gate and I met all those who came in. I greet the ladies, hug them, and I would rub fingers with the men and greet them, and they felt like somebody was genuinely interested in them. We had representation from all communities at that dance. We raised upwards of $1.7 million, and from the proceeds from that dance was used for the remainder of the year, where we had a health fair in the same space, where we looked after what 500 elderly citizens. The KPH worked with us. We picked them up from their homes and we took care of them. We had a um, treat for the kids at the Charlie Smith Comprehensive High School where we brought Disney World to West Kingston. And any ride that you can think of was there. And all the kids that came left with a gift. We had over 500 kids there. And at the end of the year, we had gift packages for the shut-in people who were ill, where we gave out close to 560 gift packages at the end of the year. So the relationship was cemented with the citizens of West Kingston. And we continued along that way up until when I was transferred from West Kingston in 2014. At the end of 2013, I must say, there is a function that they always had at the Tivoli community. They call it the Jamboree. This was not allowed to, 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 um, to take place for about 4 years prior to me coming there. And I communicated with the commissioner and said we could manage it this year. And I had a meeting with all the different communities, and the rest is history. It was the biggest jamboree that they had at Tivoli Gardens at the end of 2013. And of course, I was there to speak to the crowd, and we got them along the way that we were. West Kingston was on path to becoming a safe community as we want them to be right now. But somewhere along the line, we didn't follow suit, and the best practices were not continued. And of course, I was transferred to St. James. Right now, I am the head of the Community Safety and Security of the JCF, where we are in the process of making safe communities in the different high level violence communities in Jamaica right now. Um, we have selected our community safety and security officers from the divisions to select a safe community. So we'll have at least 19 safe communities in the 19 geographic division by the end of this year. We have already started this, and they will be driven on 6 pillars that will guide the process. The curfew program that we had in place in West Kingston will be one of the main pillars where we get these youngsters who are 17 years and under to be off the street by 9 p.m. every night so that they are not as vulnerable to these gang members who are recruiting them to become members of their gang. The schools that are in the community will become safe schools where we'll have school resource officers within to work with the deviant youngsters from an early age. A youth club must be in place, a consultative committee that is made up of citizens from within the community to deal with minor disputes and differences that lead to these gang violence that are happening in the community. And of course, an active neighborhood watch group must be there also to represent and work alongside the police force. We find that parenting is really a weak point right now within the community, so a proper mentorship program will also be developed in these communities to ensure that these communities remain safe. So, in a consistent way, we want to influence the attitudes of our young people so that we can change their behavior. Our young people are the main perpetrators of crime and violence in our country right now, and equally, they are the victims. So, anything that we are doing must be focused on our young people. It is a strategic plan, it's not going to happen overnight, but in a consistent way, if the citizens meet the police halfway, the police likewise, I think we would be on the right path to changing what is happening in our country right now.
Okay. Thank you very much, SSP McGregor. Everyone. Um, I'm pulling from SSP McGregor's presentation. You'll see some key things: the importance of a good relationship between the police and the community, and you'll notice some of the strategies he used. So he spoke, for example, of residents might not turn up to meetings, but going to the dance. So sometimes when we plan sensitization sessions, we think of holding community meetings, but then we don't get a wide cross section. So you can see the strategy that he employed: meeting the residents where they are, where you know they will turn up. So by going to the dance and talking to them for 5 minutes, he's able to get a wider cross section. And you also heard him speak about the importance of the community's role in the whole process. So with the whole issue of dances, if you want to stay longer, make sure there's no crime and violence, so that some onus is also on the community, that you also have a part to play in this process. If we're going to give you something, you need to do something in return. Thank you again, SSP McGregor, and now we'll move on to our next presenter, Ms. Erica Allen from the PMI. Could you please give her a round of applause? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me just say to Dr. Moncrieffe, I appreciate your presentation so much, because I am always happy when people can bring to the fore things that the PMI has heard over and over again. A lot of the persons here may not have access to the people like you or myself or our organization. So to hear you bring it out where people can get to hear and understand what is happening in these communities warms my heart, and I thank you so very much for that. For most of you, you know the Peace Management Initiative. Our job mostly is working with communities that are highly volatile. ACP McGregor might be very affair with some of our violence interrupters, as you mentioned, as well as we try to engage at-risk youth. And for us, at-risk youth kind of means something different for some of the agencies, because we tend to find and engage the persons who are more likely to be involved in gang activities. So while they bring up my slide, if they can find it. Oh, that's not it. Hold on. Okay, let me just say, the peace management over the, we started in 2002, that's about 17 years. Our model has changed a little bit over the period since we have been in operation. So the tactic is similar to most organizations where we go into the communities. We try to engage the persons who are most at risk, but the method has changed a little bit. Are we still searching, or should I just read from my paper? Okay, all right. Initially, in between 2002 and 2010, the primary activities were mediation, integration with sports activities, using mixed communities. So not necessarily one community, but communities that are in altercations or conflict with each other. We try to bring them to the table and get them to organized around some sporting activity in the community. We do grief counseling, income generating activities, and community peace councils, where we try to get warring factions of different communities, as well as warring factions within the community, to come together to have an understanding and try to bring some sense of peace and calm to the community. To this end, the PMI has been credited with stopping wars in Augustown, Greater Brownstown, that is Kirk for some people, that name is kind of, right, Dunkirk, Mountain View. This was done from a study commissioned by the Ministry of National Security and conducted by Andy McLean in 2009. Over that period, between 2002 and 2008, there were several communities that saw a significant reduction in violence from the PMI entered until, well, let me just say this, from we enter, we don't necessarily leave. We may not have the money to stay and have a magnificent presence as we do have in some now, but we are always there. The people are always requesting us to come back, and we offer our support. So for communities like Duane Park, they have had a long-standing peace agreement for at least 12 years. I don't want to be wrong. And that has been since the PMI went in and created a peace agreement, well, helped to support a peace agreement between Charlotte Crescent and one other section of the community. There's also, well, most people would have heard about the peace agreement in Augustown. It was recently broken, unfortunately, but that was something that we were working on for a while, and that held for a good long while. All right, in May 2010, we saw a watershed period where the security forces had the full backing of the country in going after criminals. This led to a resurgence of state authority, where it saw criminals going underground. There was also an opportunity for the truth and reconciliation in the society, and citizens were now willing to cooperate and give information to the police. And for most of you, you would know what happened in 2010, so I don't have to say what that was. Right. Okay, with this watershed period, there was a change in the landscape, where the PMI recognized an increasing trend in the criminalization of community gangs. Gangs were seeking more economic funding. This can come from inside the community or funded by members who have migrated and were supporting the gang from overseas. There was a redefining of the extortion process. It was more organized, and there was a reestablishing of the gang networks. Gang structures became more complicated in terms of gun ownership, and there was an increased reputation in killing. Just as Dr. Moncrieffe said, people now got credit for killing. You got a stripe, the more people you killed. All right, so nevertheless, the PMI recognized that there was a significant set of high-risk youth, not wanted by the police, but who were involved in gang activity and who still wanted an opportunity to change their lives. It is out of this knowledge that the PMI worked with the Ministry of National Security in developing a program based on the work previously carried out by us from 2002 with elements of the Cure Violence model. The Cure Violence model, for most people who don't know, is a public health model which targets where the violence is being produced, the perpetrators carrying out the violence, and the environment in which they are. Since we have incorporated that model in our strategy now, the current model that the PMI employs looks at community violence interruption, where we interrupt and detect conflicts using our violence interrupters. We have 75 right now across 3 sites, as we call them: Kingston, Clarendon, and St. Catherine North, mostly the Spanish Town area. We look at trauma reduction and healing and reconciliation activities, where we have a response team of social workers that go into the communities and engage the victims of families who have experienced loss or trauma. For the most part, there are people who have been killed, and we have to deal with their families. This also includes children. We have gang demobilization, where we identify and treat high-risk youth, and that involves youth mainstreaming opportunities. We also look at changing community norms and values. And as Dr. Moncrieffe said, the communities have their own cultural norms and values, separate and apart from the society. So you have to go in and get an understanding of where they are at and work with them to afford them to have a different perspective in the sense of how they see things and what is possible for specifically the youths that are there. For most of them, what they know is what they live. So giving them the opportunity to experience different things and to know that there are these things that are available to them, it helps to the transition process. Okay, so community violence interruptions looked at closed door meetings, and as I said, victim responses, community open air meetings, and of course, the deployment of the violence interrupters. Let me just say the interrupters live in the community, so these are community people who the people are familiar with and who the people respect, so they are able to connect with them on a level before we actually can go in and have a different conversation with them, whether it be in having an event in the community, a sporting event or a community integration event, or to bring our social workers in to speak to the family. Because in the old days, let me say that because I am old, the old days we used to call them gatekeepers, but for the most part, the violence interrupters are persons who can give us information in the sense of when it is safe to come into the community and give us the opportunity to talk to the persons who typically you would not be able to get to just by going in. The trauma and reduction, healing, and reconciliation activities involves grief counseling. We do group and family as well, and we look at referrals because you know there's a lot of people affected by violence in these communities. And as much as at the PMI we try our best to engage as much people as we cannot manage. So what we do is we use other services, other agencies, we call on them to help with the workload. So we refer persons to places like victim support. The gang demobilization and high-risk youth mainstreaming activities looks at establishing pathways for high-risk youth, connecting them to opportunities like art. For the most recent is the O program. We try to provide and connect them with life skill as best as possible. The literacy level is not so high, so that can provide a challenge sometimes, but we try our very best to connect them with opportunities that they are able to access. Let me just give you typically what the profile of what the high-risk youth would be, just some components. Most are unemployable, most have high levels of trauma, have been incarcerated at some point or the other, have easy access to guns, have been involved in shootings before, have been shot or have a family member shot, have friends involved in gangs, have been involved in robbery, extortion, or scamming, or have been previously involved in killings. For us, we see the same profile in most of the communities that we go in. And let me give you an example. I hope nobody, well, if anybody is here from Marchman, they would know that, and they would have heard that that community has a unique, we had a unique experience in that community in the sense that the persons that we engaged, the high-risk youth, we saw 80% of them being dropouts from high school, 80% of them, and we're talking about from about 50 to 60 young men, 16 to 27 years. 80% of them have had a family member killed from gang violence, and 70% of them have been involved in gang activity. So that shows you the level of trauma, the level of violent producers, or possible and potential violence producers that we are engaging with and that are in a society that needs social intervention. Yes, so we are looking, one component that is close to us in the sense that once you change how people think, you change their view and ultimately change their behavior. So changing the norms and values is one of the things that we use as well outside of dealing with them one-on-one to change the level of violence in these communities. That is the hope, that is the goal, that is the objective. So we strengthen the capacity of communities to participate in creating a safe space. This can happen from the youth councils that they are a part of, well, the peace councils we call them, as well as the violence interrupters. They mentor other young men who want to be a part of the process, who come on board and eventually themselves become violence interrupters. Currently in March Pen, we had a program with them in 2014, and now we have 3 persons from that community who are violence interrupters in that community working with the same young men. The effectiveness of the program to date, the current model that we're using started in 2014, and it is currently being evaluated by the ministry. The program targets 20 communities, 10 in St. Catherine North, that is in Spanish Town, 5 in Kingston and 5 in Clarendon. We have treated approximately 500 potential violence producers so far, and treated mean at some point they have been referred to other programs like CSJP, or they have been found employment opportunities, or they have been filtered into other agencies that provide skills training, whether it be public or private. At least 2,500 high-risk young men are engaged by the violence interrupters each week. It's across all sites. So 75 persons, and you live in the communities, and you might be privy to the information. Imagine how many young men who are unattached, not going to school, who are on the streets, in the corner, when you drive by, when you walk by, you see them. There is that many, and the 2,500 is nowhere near the number that can be engaged on a weekly basis, because not every one of them is open to have a conversation with the interrupters as they engage them in the community. Some people just don't want to hear, but eventually our hope is that we draw them in by seeing friends or family members making a different life change or going on a different path. At least 12 of the 20 target areas have recorded less than 3 murders over the last 3 months. At least 8 of the 20 target areas have recorded murders in their spaces over the last 6 months. And while we work in these communities, our work is supported by external factors. Yes, thank you, I see the time. One important, I'm just gonna give you 3. A supportive political environment, because we know what the politics is in our society and how that can impact persons in the community. Good community policing, and substantive and sustainable social intervention driven by data. It is very important. That is why I appreciate Dr. Moncrieffe's presentation so much, because she gives you an idea of what is happening on the ground and what it will take to make an effective change for persons. So our role at the PMI is community transformation, whether it be individual or by just engaging persons in the community. Our objective is to take the community from crisis to a safe and sustainable environment. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Allen. I think we're winding down. We're almost there. And I think we have given probably the hardest task to Dr. Burke to keep everyone engaged, especially like how lunch is now setting in and probably people might be feeling a bit sleepy. But Dr. Burke, I know you're up to the task. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Burke as she presents the Augustown experience.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. I'm wondering now if I should try to do some dance move in order to wake up everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? All right. It don't sound so wake up, but wake up, we are winding down. And I'm presenting to you on lessons learned from Augustown on crime development and crime management. The idea is to give you first a little background, set the context in which we have been in Augustown, in order that we can say we have some lessons that we learn from. We have been in Augustown since the inception of, The university was established in 1948. Now, Augustown actually existed long before that because it is one of the first districts. It is one of the first area following emancipation in 1838. Now, one of the first important element that I want to point to is that in 1951, we had the Great Hurricane, yeah? And at that time, many incidents occurred, one of which was the emergence of the second district in the area. The first was Augustown Black Hill, right at the top there, and then Hermitage. UWI employed most persons, but the position in which they were employed at the time was mainly ancillary workers. The community was used a lot as an incubator for UWI to conduct its research from the pure and applied science area in particular. The characteristics of the relationship is one that it was more or less informal because you had the middle class students and the working class residents, because as I said, mainly ancillary workers. In the 1960s, we didn't have students lodging in Augustown. There was no wall. Yes, it was an open place, free access between the community and the campus. The expatriates learned a lot from the community. They went down there for their cow tongue, reggae music, etc., ball game, football, cricket, and the residents came to the campus to also learn some of the expatriates' culture. Although there was the presence of antisocial behavior, it was really petty theft in those days, and yes, the usual sexual assault. The demographic changed, yes, in the 1970s. Now we had the emergence of some more informal settlements in the area. We had Goldsmith Villa, Angola, Bedward Gardens, and African Gardens. Today, the Staten has the population recorded as having over 15,000 residents in the area. Now we look at the era of the gangs. In 1970s, the Hermitage gang was allied to Tivoli, Labourite garrison. Jungle 12, which is the central part of Augustown, that part was allied more to the PNP gang. There were a number, and still exist, more or less, a number of corner crews and gang. Extortion was rampant, and one of the main aims that they had at the time in the 70s was to take total control of Augustown. Now, as you see here, this is what the political profile of the gangs in the 70s were. And I must say there were six particular warring gangs. More serious crimes in the community emerged after a while, and this spilled over on the campus. You had high incidents of rape, abduction, household break-ins, students being robbed, visitors, staff, etc. These more serious crimes caused for some form of response from the university. What did we do? We constructed a police post or implemented a police post. We erected a huge concrete perimeter wall, which replaced, remember at first there was no wall, then we had a kind of chain link fence, but now we put up some concrete structures. That wasn't all, because we still had the incidents on the campus. So we engaged a whole heap of of campus security officers. Well, the name now is courtesy officers. And yes, naturally, this was a large drain on our budget. All of these increased incidents, which included in 2008 actual gun war on the campus, resulted in the university taking another look to say, hey, I've done all of this, I've paid all of this in terms of direct financial investment, and it's getting worse and worse. What can we do? Another era I want to bring to our attention is that in 1997, you remember it was that time with the reggae boys, all of this fervor, football, everybody trying to keep peace everywhere. You had more or less this feel-good feeling. And so there were also various community football clubs, etc., in the various communities. One was in Augustown as well, and the residents in Augustown, they were trying as much as possible to now start some peace initiative for themselves. And I must mention that it was initiated, and most of you would have, well, let me not say that. Some persons would have heard the name Kenneth Wilson. He's normally on the radio and in various places. He was one of the first persons. He was a carpenter, a woodworker, came to the University of the West Indies, approached the then Professor Barry Shevans, and asked for some assistance in trying now to stem this crime and violence that was so much in Augustown. It had kind of gotten beyond his capabilities, and so he sought our interference. Our intervention, sorry, thank you. Now I know you're listening. Yeah, right, good. So what did we do? Employed Kenneth Wilson, and he was charged with certain responsibilities, one of which was working with the gangs, because he had already started working with the gangs. Because he didn't have all of the necessary capacity to do what he had to do, he got additional training. He and some other members got some additional training at the Eastern Mennonite University. He also, sports is his passion. And so what we did, we identified the passion within these persons and worked with that passion. So his role also was that of sports, using sports as one of the ways to help in brokering peace. Then the University Township Project was born in 2006. And we had 4 main aims at the time: to foster integration of Augustown with the campus, because there was no trust between Augustown and the campus. The campus used to be where they come, they pick the plums, the ackies, etc. They go sell it at the market, and that was income generation, yeah? But when we put up the other measures, the securities, etc., they had no more access. And so there was no more friendship, more or less, or far reduced friendship between Augustown and the campus. So we needed to foster the relationship. We needed also to play a part in reduction in crime and violence, because it was impacting not only the community, but also us on the campus, because it is just a wall that separates the campus from the community. We also had as an objective to make the Mona Bowl and the community a center of excellence in education. We were saying, hey, we have the best university there, and there is the community where the research showed that more than 50% of the persons were unemployed, underemployed, illiterate, etc. What are we doing? And we are right there. So we say we will be making the Mona Bowl and the university a place of excellence for them to be able to tap into. And we also wanted to increase the social and intellectual capital in Augustown. So what are some of the early activities that we did? Rather than just going in, doing some research, or doing some work and going out, we went in, we established an office, we broke out the partnership with Jamaica National Building Society, JN Bank now, who had established a source in Augustown. Then we started working with the women's group, the youth group, the CSJP, the SDC, and various other persons in the community. We held a conference and workshops in order to identify with the people the needs of the community, so that when we were going to implement the intervention